I must admit that this is the first Atlus game that I've played up to now. I'm well aware of them as a developer though. They have a frighteningly huge back catalog of games, and a lot of them are RPGs that take dozens of hours to complete. Probably the most widely known and popular series are the Persona games. But seeing the lengthy playtimes that are required to beat one of these games has always discouraged me from picking one up. Catherine was a game that, back when it was released, somewhat piqued my interest. It seemed like a unique blend of elements, but at the time I had other games that I wanted to play more, and I sort of just forgot about it. I wasn't even aware that it eventually got a PC release, but a few months ago, Humble Bundle offered Catherine as part of one of their monthly bundles, so I thought to myself, why not finally play it? Catherine is a weird game to summarize. It's part romance anime and part survival horror puzzle game. The central narrative is basically Love Triangle, the game. The story concerns a sweaty dude in his early 30s called Vincent Brooks, who finds himself in a situation where he has to choose between his long-term stable relationship or a manic pixie dream girl that randomly enters his life and tries to seduce him. These two characters both share the same name, only his girlfriend is called Catherine with a K and the seductress is called Catherine with a C. This fact has literally nothing to do with the actual story, it's just so the voiceovers had to be done just once because regardless of who you pick, they're always called the same in spoken dialogue. Both Catherines have wildly different personalities though. Girlfriend Catherine is a fairly controlling figure in Vincent's life, always making demands of him or complaining when he's out drinking with his friends, so in order to make the two Catherines easier to differentiate, I'll just call this one Karen for obvious reasons. Seductress Catherine, on the other hand, is pretty free-spirited at first glance since she does what she pleases, but the further the narrative goes along, the more psychotic and melodramatic she becomes. The dichotomy is pretty clear. Karen represents boring but mature stability, while Catherine represents exciting, youthful freedom. Things get more complicated when Karen has a pregnancy scare that Vincent learns about just as soon as his quote-unquote affair with Catherine starts. I say quote-unquote affair because it's never clear if he actually cheated on Karen. He doesn't initiate anything with Catherine, but she always just wakes up next to him in his apartment. Only he never has any recollection of actually doing anything with her. At this point, the plot kinda lost me because I just can't stand stories that stand or fall on one character's inability to just come forth with something. But no, Vincent can't tell Catherine that he already has a girlfriend, and he obviously also can't tell Karen about him apparently involuntarily cheating on her. As a result, he gets haunted by nightmares, and this is where the actual gameplay comes in. Each night there are a handful of levels where you have to climb constructs made of cubes that you can push and pull around in order to create paths up the tower. And every night has a few new additional blocks that force you to change up the gameplay, like spike traps, exploding blocks, or ice blocks, but the basic gist of it is fairly simple to understand. I have to say that I'm a bit torn on the gameplay though. In principle, I like it, since I enjoy real-time puzzle games where you have to think fast to beat them. In this game's case, that means that the tower is continuously collapsing under you, so you always have a ticking clock. And during the boss stages, there's usually a grotesque monster climbing up after you as well. But at certain spots, the levels are so maliciously designed that, between all those special blocks and the collapsing nature of the tower, you can end up in a situation where you can't go neither forth nor back. And at least for me, those spike traps were at times so quick to set off that I died repeatedly to them without knowing why, because I timed my inputs at the exact same rate as every other time, but sometimes the game just refused to accept my input. For some reason, the developers decided that this game had to have a live system, which is entirely beyond me because it's just an annoying roadblock. If you save manually at every possibility, you can just load your most recent save and get all those lives back, so the system serves no purpose other than to waste time. Other than that, I'm not sure what else to say about the gameplay. It's so basic and simple that you can see the bare-bones flash game variant of this type of game in the arcade machine at the pub. There's so little to it. I also felt that the difficulty of the levels seemed to vary wildly back and forth between stages that are easily beatable and others being utterly infuriating. This is particularly true in cases where you need to undo a few moves in order to try another strategy, only for the rest of the level, like the hazards, enemies or bosses, not to reset themselves. So if, say, a boss manages to catch up to you and you undo a couple of moves, that doesn't always make the boss also go back down the tower again to where they were at the time when you made the original move for some reason. But honestly, even if the levels are fairly difficult, even on the normal difficulty setting, at least it was never that frustrating that it tempted me to quit, so there must be at least something they did right. I mean, overall, the gameplay is fine, certain annoyances notwithstanding, but it's just that it's fairly insubstantial and it also doesn't have anything to do with the actual narrative. What's also insubstantial is all the stuff happening outside of the nightmares. Oh sure, there are lots of long talky scenes between characters, but they all happen in the same 4 places and only one of them is actually interactive, which is the aforementioned pub. But all you can do there is talk to other people, and it seems like all the people at the bar also seem to be suffering from the same nightmares you have to go through, since the same characters appear as sheep with certain identifiable clothing items in your dreams as well. Turns out that all these people are being punished for something they did, and if you don't talk to them at every opportunity, they'll lose hope and die, which is something that gets reported as an ongoing story on television. But in order to talk to everybody, you need to keep track of time, because every interaction you make at the pub advances the clock, and people come and go at predetermined times. So prepare to figure out all their routines and reset your save states in order to talk to everybody about their problems if you really care about saving them all. I mean, there's not a lot of reasons to do so, because you don't get any rewards from it, but on the other hand, there's so little to do outside of the nightmare stages that you might as well do it. If you do, you might notice that all the people getting punished are male for some reason. I don't want to delve too deep into it here, because I don't want to turn this review into a political diatribe, but suffice to say that I'm not sure that this game, which ostensibly is about relationships, has the healthiest outlook on men and women. All the men are portrayed as sinful pigs that deserve to be punished for some reason, while the 3 major female characters in the story reinforce tired old gender stereotypes about controlling, nagging shrews or whoring succubi. And the game has the gall of asking you questions about relationships and judging you by your answers, because this game came out in the early 2010s when binary moral choice meters were all the rage and everything had to be dumbed down into a linear graph on which you could be measured by. My answers to many of these questions were so diverging at times that my compass needle ended up mostly in the middle. And honestly, even though my playthrough ended with Vincent getting back together with Karen after she broke up with him after finding out about his cheating, I would have liked to aim for the ending where he stays single. Because honestly, neither of these stereotypes on legs sound all that appealing to me. Then again, Vincent is such a tool of a character that he deserves either the Harpy or the Psycho. But I'll be damned if I play through this entire game again in order to unlock all the other endings to get a satisfying one. For one, the talkie scenes and the bits at the pub are so damn long and mostly just pointless. But you can't just skip or ignore them, you still need to pay attention because sometimes there's an answer that influences the aforementioned moral choice meter and that requires having context. Another aspect that frequently went on my nerves is the music. Now don't get me wrong, there are some kick-ass tunes in here, especially some amazing remixes of orchestral compositions. I mean, I was surprised as anyone to hear freaking Mars, Bringer of War by Gustav Holst during the first Nightmare level, or pieces by Bach, Beethoven and Bizet. Those were just awesome. But for every banger like these, there are things like the jazz reharmonized version of Silent Night that plays in the pub after everyone has left, or just outright bad porn or erotic thriller music, and those pieces just suck. Overall, I'm not sure I can recommend Catherine. The gameplay is at least passable, but the narrative is comprised of all the worst anime tropes, an angsty main character that can never just talk straight, and a plot that hinges on that fact. I mean, the basic narrative gist is that this is a Freddy Krueger movie about people dying in their dreams for a silly Deus Ex Machina reason that gets pulled out of the game's ass at the very end with no foreshadowing that completely renders the preceding character arcs of all the other men who you help overcome their anxieties pointless. Yeah, I'm going to spoil the game here, but honestly I don't care, it's a decade old. If you want a final verdict, I'd advise against playing it, but if you're still interested, you can skip the rest of this video and you don't have to hear any spoilers. At the end, it's revealed that Catherine never actually existed in the form you experience her. She's literally just a succubus sent to seduce Vincent. Nobody else ever sees her, and at some point after you tell her to fuck off, all the messages and pictures she sends are deleted from your phone, so there's absolutely no trace left of her. And I mean, if she were real, how would she have had access to Vincent's apartment? She doesn't even have a key for it, and yet still manages to wake up next to him every time, even when he specifically goes home without her from the pub. And speaking of the pub, it's weird how all the other guys you see in your dreams can all be encountered at that very pub, right? Well, it's because the guy who runs the place is also behind all the nightmares that are supposed to either kill you or otherwise tear apart your relationships. And for what? Well, the curse of these nightmares seems to happen every century or so, and each time there's one person that manages to escape from it, and the owner of the bar is the guy who managed it last time. He gets recruited by the gods, and I have no idea what pantheon this game is supposed to take place in, because it uses names like Astaroth and Ishtar, which belong to Hebrew and Mesopotamian religions respectively. And he also has to repeat said cycle in order to secure that humanity's women get together with men who actually want to be in relationships that end up producing offspring. So it's basically a celestial eugenics program. A really stupid one if you ask me, if all the resources of literal gods boil down to giving you nightmares if you frequent a specific bar and happen to not fit into the exact sexual criteria required of you. This stuff comes entirely out of left field at the very end of a narrative that's incredibly stingy with giving you any kind of explanation of what's going on and why. Heck, the big bad even admits his entire plan to you at the slightest bit of questioning, and seemingly everybody is just on board with this now being about killing a literal god with the power of boners. I guess Japanese games just aren't complete if they are not about killing a deity by the end of it in some way. And after the game is beaten, the developers have the audacity of patting themselves on the back, presenting the gameplay as a metaphor for the journey to adulthood. Yeah, no. You as a creator don't just get to tell me how clever you were with what you did, especially not by pretending like the moral choice aspect of this game was such a unique and great idea when everybody else was doing it too. So yeah, unfortunately, by the end of it, I wasn't too impressed with this game.